Broly and Invincible, episode 3. Let's get it, man. In this episode, Adam Eve finds Broly. Let's go. The front door clicked shut with a sound that was far too small for the cataclysm. Mark Grayson carried inside. He stood in the foyer, his shoulders slumped, still clad in his invincible suit, beneath a jacket smudged with alien soot and his own dried blood with his mask off. The living room was warm, bathed in the soft glow of a table lamp. Debbie Grayson looked up from the couch, a book forgotten in her lap. The moment she saw her son's face, with the hollow look in his eyes, and the way he seemed to be holding his body together by sheer will, her own heart constricted. "Mark?" she said, her voice soft with immediate concern. She rose, crossing the room to him. "Honey, what's wrong? Is it your father? Did something—" "It's Broly," Mark interrupted, the name cracking as it left his lips. He finally met her gaze, and the raw pain there made her want to pull him into her arms and never let go. Debbie's mind raced. What's wrong? Is he hurt?" "He saved me," Mark whispered, the words tumbling out of a torrent of guilt and anguish. There was an army, Mom. These flaxen things. We were losing. I was pinned. One of them was about to, and then he just was there. He stopped it." A flicker of relief sparked in Debbie's chest, but it died instantly at the look on Mark's face. But then he just lost control. It was like a switch flipped. He was this unstoppable force tearing through an entire army by himself. He was so angry. I've never seen him like that. Mark's voice dropped to a horrified whisper. He chased them. When they retreated through their portal, he followed them. He's gone, Mom. He's trapped in some other dimension, and I couldn't stop him. I couldn't get to him in time. The full weight of the confession settled in the quiet room. Debbie's breath hitched. The image filled her mind. The gentle, hulking boy who had eaten cookies at her table and slept in her guest room. Now a teenage raging god lost between worlds. Without a word, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her son, pulling his head to her shoulder. Mark shuddered, finally allowing the tears he'd been holding back to fall. As she held him, rubbing his back, Debbie looked over his shoulder, her own eyes glistening. A single hot tear escaped and traced the path down her cheek. She was quite fond of Broly. Deeply so. He had been a constant in their lives for years, Mark's first and most loyal friend. He was the quiet boy who helped with the dishes without even being asked, whose presence was as solid and comforting as an old oak tree in their backyard. He was family, and now he was gone, sacrificed in a storm of his own power to save her boy and God knows who else. The relief that Mark was safe warred with a profound maternal grief for the other son that she had lost. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the room was sterile, a sterile, soundproof cube, illuminated only by the cool blue light of a central holographic table. Cecil Stedman, still in his suit, with his tie loosened, watched his robot's armored form glided silently through the sliding door as it hissed shut, isolating them completely. "Cecil," Robot greeted, his voice a synthetic, unwavering baritone. "Robot," Cecil replied, his tone wary. "You were adamant about this meeting. The world is still putting out fires for today. This had better be crucial." It is. Robot didn't bother with pleasantries. A hologram flickered to life above the table, displaying combat footage from the Flaxen invasion. It showed Broly, a maelstrom of green energy casually ripping a tank in half. The subject, Broly. Cecil sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. I've seen the after-action reports. The boy has power. Unrivaled power, it seems. He also saved Invincible and likely prevented the teen team from being overrun, including yourself. We should be discussing a medal, not an inquisition right now. Your sentiment is a liability, Robot stated. Not with malice, but with a cold certainty of a logic processor. The footage zoomed in on Broly's face, his eyes glazed white, devoid of any reason. Look at the biometric extrapolation. There was no tactical awareness, no discrimination between threat and civilian infrastructure. He was a force of nature, a berserker. He didn't win a battle, he simply ran out of targets on our side of this dimensional rift. Cecil leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. I am not sentimental. I'm practical. That berserker, as you call him, single-handedly repelled a full-scale transdimensional invasion that your team was losing to, I might add. The Flaxans have tried twice before. This was their most determined assault, and he broke it within minutes. At what cost? Robot countered. And what will it cost if he returns? We traded an external threat for a potential internal one of incalculable magnitude. A weapon you cannot control is not a weapon. It is a catastrophe that's just waiting to happen. Cecil's gaze was steely. I am aware of that possibility, Rudy. Never forget the certainty. The certainty is that we needed a miracle today, and he provided it. My job is to defend this planet with every asset at my disposal. Until he gives me a reason to believe otherwise, Broly is an asset. A dangerous, volatile one, maybe. But our dangerous, volatile asset. Now draft your contingency plans, but keep them to yourself. The unspoken order hung in the air. I will hope for the best, but you prepare for the worst. It was a fragile, necessary tolerance. The foundation of all their futures was in the balance, it seemed. A low-pained groan escaped Broly's lips as consciousness returned. Not with a gentle nudge, but with the crushing weight of a landslide. Every muscle screamed in protest, a deep bone-weary ache that felt like he'd been used as a battering ram against a mountain. He pushed himself up, his hands sinking into the soft crimson soil. The air was thin and carried a bitter metallic tang that coated his tongue. He blinked, his vision swimming into focus, and the world that resolved around him was a canvas of hell. The sky was perpetual bruised twilight, devoid of stars or sun. The ground was a sickening rust red, littered not with rocks, but with shattered remnants of the Flaxan army. War machines were twisted into unrecognizable sculptures of scrap metal, their hulls torn open like foil. And the bodies, they were everywhere, piles of them. Their strange green-skinned forms were broken, limbs bent at impossible angles, their carapaces splintered. Broly's gaze dropped to his own body. His Saiyan armor was caked in drying blood, flaxen blood. It was splattered across his chest plate, staining the black fabric of his undersuit, clinging to his arms in flaking violet crust. His knuckles were raw and bruised. Broly's gaze dropped to, A cold, sharp dread began to pierce the fog of his exhaustion. He remembered the heat of the battle. The surge of adrenaline as he stood between Mark and the Flaxen leader. He remembered the anger, a familiar volcanic heat rising in his gut. As more and more of them came at an endless tide, the memories were flashes like fragments of a nightmare, the sound of rending metal, alien shrieks, the sensation of his own power, spiraling out of control as a green haze swallowed his very own vision. Then nothing. A blank, roaring static. His breath hitched, coming in a short gasp as his eyes scanned the absolute carnage that stretched to the horizon. This wasn't a battlefield, it was a slaughterhouse, it was a graveyard, and the chilling, undeniable truth settled in the pit of his stomach, cold and heavy as any stone. I did this. The thought was a poison. All of it. The silence, the death, the utter devastation. It was all him. A low, horrified whimper escaped him, the sound lost in the vast, dead silence of the red world. He was a monster, and he was alone with the proof of this fact in a graveyard. A cold, persistent drizzle fell from the sky, the color of bruised lead, misting the black suits and umbrellas of the gathered mourners. The air was thick with silence that the gentle patter of rain only seemed to emphasize. Rows of fresh headstones stood as grim monuments to the fallen guardians. Mark stood a little apart from the main crowd, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, the water beating on the black sleeves of his jacket. He wasn't crying. He felt he should be, staring at the graves of a mortal, a hero that he revered his entire life, but the grief felt distant, abstract, and overshadowed by a mere immediate, gnawing terror. A soft presence appeared at his side. Adam Eve, her usual vibrant costume muted by the gloom, stood beside him, holding a simple black umbrella over them both. "Hey," she said, her voice quiet, meant only for him. "How are you holding up?" Mark was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the graves. "I don't know," he finally admitted, the words hollow. "I know I'm supposed to be devastated, but I am. This is horrible, but every time I try to focus on it, my mind just goes somewhere else." "To Broly," Eve said, not as a question, but a quiet understanding. A wave of guilt washed over Mark's face. "Yeah. Is that terrible? That I'm more worried about my friend who's lost in another dimension than I am about the heroes who died right here?" "No," Eve said firmly. "It's human. They're gone. He's in limbo. It's the not knowing that eats at you." She shifted her weight, glancing over at the somber scene. "I've been thinking about him too. I never knew he was that strong. I mean, I saw the footage, and I resaw the footage. It was terrifying and also inspiring in a tense way." She paused, a faint self-conscious frown on her face. "Then again, I never really talked to him much in school to begin with. He was just the quiet giant in the back of a history class. Now that I think about it, I don't think I ever heard him say a full sentence out loud." A small, sad smile touched Mark's lips. "Yeah, that's Broly. He and we've been close since we were kids. He's always had his powers. He grew up on this crazy island full of monsters. That's just normal for him." Mark's gaze became distant, remembering afternoons spent in his backyard, with Broly leaping over the house with an ease that defied physics. "But he doesn't want this," Mark continued, gesturing vaguely at the funeral, at the symbolism of it all. "He never has. The suit, the speeches, the parades. He thinks it's just a cage. He just wants to protect his friends, that's it. And now, because he did exactly that, he's gone." Eve listened, her perspective on the quiet, intimidating boy from school shifting dramatically. He wasn't aloof, he was reserved. He wasn't a latent threat, he was a reluctant guardian. And he was her teammate's best friend, lost in the chaos he never even asked for. The funeral around him felt like a tragedy of the past, but Broly's absence felt like an open wound that was threatening the future. The oppressive silence from the car ride home bled into the living room. The somber rain-soaked atmosphere of the funeral had followed them inside. Clinging to their dark clothes, Mark shrugged off his jacket and tossed it over a chair, the weight of the day bowing his shoulders. Nolan, having already changed into his casual wear, broke the quiet with a tone that was jarringly normal. "I was thinking, we could get some pizza. From that place you like, Mark. The one with the stuffed crust." It was the final straw. Mark spun around, his face a mask of raw, disbelieving anger. "Pizza? Are you serious?" "Mark," Debbie started, her voice a warning whisper. "No, Mom. My best friend is missing. Trapped on a hostile alien world, and you," he jabbed a finger at his father, "you haven't even asked about him. You haven't even said his name once. It's like he just vanished and you don't even care." Nolan's expression remained infuriatingly placid, his hands resting on his hips. "I care that you are distracted by an emotional attachment. The boy made a choice, and it was a reckless one, but a choice nonetheless. Sacrifice is part of the job description for people like us. You need to become numb to it, or it will break you. That's the simple truth." "That's not truth, that's just cold-hearted." Mark shot back, his voice cracking. He looked at his father as if he saw a stranger. Without another word, he turned and stormed up the stairs, his bedroom door slamming shut with a sound that echoed through the house. The ensuing silence was heavy and tense. Debbie turned to Nolan with her eyes pleading and exasperated. "Nolan, for God's sake. He's 16. His friend is gone. Could you for 1 minute try to be his father and not some drill instructor? Show him some empathy." Nolan met her gaze, his own utterly sincere and completely uncomprehending. I was, he stated, his voice calm and firm. I was being honest with him, preparing him. That's how I care. He walked toward the kitchen, leaving Debbie alone in the living room as she wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the chilling vastness of the gulf that had just opened up, not just between her son and her husband, but between her and the man that she thought that she knew. The fluorescent lights of the school hallway buzzed, a mundane sound that felt utterly disconnected from the chaos in Mark's life. He moved through the crowd on autopilot, the echo of the funeral dirge and the memory of red hellish landscape warring in his mind. Everything felt gray, the world muted by Broly's absence. Then he saw her, Amber, laughing with a friend by her locker, a splash of vibrant, normal life in the gloom. For a moment, the weight lifted. Here was something simple, something human, an anchor. He took a breath, steeling himself, and walked over. Hey, Amber. She turned, her smile warm and easy. Hey, Mark, you okay? You look a little out of it. It's been a week, he said, an understatement, feeling massive. He gripped the strap of his backpack tighter. I was wondering, with finals coming up, would you want to maybe have a study date? Somewhere quiet. Amber's eyes lit up with a playful glint. A study day? Is that what we're calling it? She chuckled at his flustered expression. I'm kidding. Yeah, that sounds great. Your place or mine? Mine will be perfect, Mark said, a genuine, if wary smile finally breaking through. For a few seconds, the crushing worry for Broly, the confusion about his father, and the grief for the Guardians, it all receded, replaced by a simple, thrilling prospect of pizza and textbooks with a girl that he liked. He watched her walk away, the brief moment of light already fading. The hallway felt loud again in the image of his lost friend. Alone on a crimson world, rushed back in to feel the silence she left behind. He clung to the plan with Amber like a life raft. A scheduled piece of normalcy in a world that was falling apart around him, it seemed. Then, of course, we get to the part where Rex cheats on Duplicate, but since this is its own universe, I think I'll change it up a little bit, just for fun. The headquarters felt cavernous and hollow after the day's somber events. Adam Eve phased through the main entrance, the quiet hum of machinery, stark contrast to the mournful silence of the cemetery. The weight of the Guardian's funeral was a heavy cloak on her shoulders, and all she wanted was familiar, if not often frustrating, comfort of her teammates. Maybe Rex would be his usual cocky self, and for once his lack of gravitas would be a welcome distraction from the day's profound grief. She found the common area dark, lit only by the city skyline glowing through the panoramic windows. But a sound from the rec room, a muffled giggle followed by a low, familiar laugh, drew her forward. Her first thought was relief. They were there. She wasn't alone. Pushing the door open, the scene that greeted her was a physical blow, knocking the wind from her lungs and freezing her in the doorway. There, on the worn-out couch, where they debriefed missions and shared pizzas, was Rex Splode. And he wasn't alone. Duplicate was wrapped around him, or rather, three of her were. One, Kate, was nestled against his side, another was whispering something in his ear that made him smirk, and a third was trailing a finger down his chest. The air was thick with intimate conspiratorial energy of a shamed secret. Time seemed to stretch, the image searing itself into her mind. The half-empty soda can on the floor, the lazy, possessive way Rex's arm was slung around the primary Kate's shoulder. The way they all froze as the door creaked. Rex's eyes, wide with momentary panic, met hers. Eve! Hey, we were just... But Eve wasn't listening. Her gaze swept from the guilty face to Kate's multiple, identically startled expressions. The grief for the fallen heroes, the residual worry for Broly because of her concern for Mark, the fragile hope she'd felt at the funeral. It all curdled in an instant, replaced by white-hot, humiliated fury. This was the reality she came back to, while the world mourned her boyfriend and her teammate were defiling their shared home. Without a word, her face a mask of cold, betrayed fury, Eve turned on her heel. The last thing she heard was one of the Kates hissing, Rex, eat, you idiot, before she stormed out the door, slamming shut behind her with a final finality that echoed the shattering of her trust. The vast gymnasium echoed with the sounds, hopeful new heroes demonstrating their abilities for robots where people are, trying out for Guardians of the Globe. The atmosphere was meant to be one of the focused recruitment, a step toward rebuilding. But for Mark, standing with the core team, the tension was so thick, it felt like a physical weight. It all crystallized when Robot, his voice devoid of any human nuance, began assigning squads. Adam Eve, you'll be partnered with Rexplode and Duplicate for the urban pacification simulation. Eve, who had been staring a hole into the far wall, didn't even turn her head. No. The flat final word cut through the gym's ambient noise. Rex flinched. Kate's multiples looked at each other uncomfortable. Robot processed this for a nanosecond. Look, the assignment is based on optimal power synergy. I don't care, Eve said, her voice cold and sharp. I'm not working with them. Put me with anyone else. Put me by myself, but not with them. She finally turned, and the raw, scorching hurt in her eyes was enough to make Mark take a half step back. Without another word, she strode away to the other side of the hangar, a bubble of hostile space moving with her. Rex threw his hands up, a mask of defensive arrogance snapping into place. What the hell is her problem? The recruit lowered his... Mark, utterly bewildered, leaned over to one of the newer, more gossip-oriented recruits. Whoa, what was all that about? The recruit lowered his voice, eager to share the scandal. Dude, you didn't hear? Rex got caught. He was messing around with Duplicate at the HQ. Eve walked right in on him. The pieces slammed together in Mark's mind. Eve's stormy exit after the funeral. The avoided glances, the palpable hostility. He looked from Rex's smirking, unrepentant face to the cluster of Kate's, and a wave of disgust washed over him. He thought of Broly's unwavering silent loyalty, and this betrayal made it even more vile. Shaking his head, Mark muttered to the recruit, the words filled with a sudden certain contempt. You know, I always thought that guy was a douchebag. It was a simple teenage judgment, but in that moment it felt like the most profound truth that was in the room. The confrontation with Rex had been brief, brutal, and utterly necessary. Adam Eve didn't shout. Her voice was a low, frigid calm that left no room for his excuses or trademark arrogance. When she finally said the words, "It's over," it felt less like a breakup and more like a surgical removal of a poisoned limb. There was pain, of course, a sharp, grieving ache for the trust he'd obliterated, but beneath it was a clean, clear certainty of her own worth. That certainty, however, left a void. The silence of her apartment was suddenly oppressive. Instinctively, her thoughts turned to Mark. Surely he understood loss. He'd been at the funeral. He was shouldering the unknown fate of his best friend. He was a port in this sudden emotional storm. Without overthinking it, she took to the skies, cutting through the cool evening air toward the familiar suburban outline of the Grayson house. She hovered for a moment in a dimming twilight just above the room of the house across the street, intending to text him or simply knock, but as she looked down into the Graysons' backyard, she stopped there. They were, Mark and Amber, standing at the back porch light, caught in a perfect, private moment. Amber was laughing at something Mark had said, and he was leaning in, his expression a mixture of nervousness and tender hope. Their kiss wasn't dramatic or world-saving. It was just shy, sweet, and profoundly normal. A complex wave of emotion washed over Eve, but not really jealousy, but a sudden protective warmth in a world collapsing into funerals, betrayals, and disappearances. Here was a small, defiant spark of simple human joy. She wouldn't be the one to extinguish it with her own turmoil and problems. A small, genuine smile touched her lips, the first real one she'd had in days. Silently, she pivoted in the air and flew off, leaving the two of them wrapped in their fragile, perfect bubble, happy that at least one of them had found a solid anchor in all this chaos. Once again, I changed this kiss scene too, just for the fun of it. But anyway. The wind whipped past Adam Eve as she cut a solitary path through the crisp night air, the lights of the city sprawling beneath her like scattered constellations. The encounter with Mark and Amber had left her with a bittersweet calm, but the solitude of flight was now morphing back into the familiar loneliness. Suddenly, the air itself tore open, not with a boom, but with a sickening silent rip directly above a deserted industrial park. A wound of violet lightning and swirling obsidian energy, a perfect, terrifying match to the flaxen portals that she'd seen before. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Not again, not here. She dove, energy already crackling around her fist, ready to face this new invasion. But no army poured forth. Instead, a single figure tumbled from the chaotic maw and crashed onto a gravel-covered rooftop below. The impact sending a shockwave through the steel framework, the portal snapped shut, leaving an eerie silence behind. Eve hovered, cautious, scanning the crater. Then she saw him. It was Broly, but he was changed. The quiet giant from school was gone, replaced by a haunted specter. His Saiyan armor was in scratches, he was caked in dried alien blood and grime, his knuckles were raw, but it was his eyes that held her wide, disoriented, and burning with a pain that was more profound than any physical wound she'd seen. All hesitation vanished. Then, this wasn't a threat. This was a casualty. She landed softly a few feet away, her defensive stance melding into one of concern. "Broly?" she said, her voice gentle against the industrial silence. He flinched at the sound, his wild eyes snapping to hers. "It's Eve. From school. And I think she was around in that Flaxen fight." She took a tentative step closer, her gaze scanning his battered form. "What happened to you? Are you all right?" The question felt absurd, given the evidence, but it was the only one that mattered. He was back, and he was clearly not okay. Alright, so that'll be the end of this episode. Hope you guys liked it. It was kind of slow, but we're building up for things. Like I told you guys in my community tab, I've actually finished like the whole script for this. I only have 2 more episodes to do. I already have the Battle Beast thing and all that's going to be lit. So y'all stay tuned for that. Anyways, I'll catch y'all on the next one. I'll be uploading these back to back on schedule. Peace.